Hey everyone, it's me, Rami Marks, your Tangled Yogi out here in Northern California, and I'm so excited to bring you this class today. We are going to be working with Cassatt. It's a new tangle created by my friend Heidi K, and I'll be putting on her link to her website on this video in the class description. So you'll have to go and check her out. She's one of my very favorite tanglers, very colorful, and is an amazing teacher. She's got a lot of videos up on her site, so you should definitely check her out. Things that we are going to be using for class today. I have a 5x5 tile that I made out of really nice super smooth cardstock. This is black cardstock, and my cardstock happens to be about 80 pounds, but if you've got 60 pounds, that's fine. And hey, if you don't have black cardstock, do it on white cardstock or tan cardstock. Remember, we're making do with what we have these days. I also happen to have my Signo gold pen. I love this pen. It's my favorite. So you should definitely check this out. This is the Signo Uniball Gold. And then I also have my Signo Uniball White. Okay, now if you don't happen to have the gold, you could probably use the gold from Sakura. Their Jelly Roll Gold is fine, but I do appreciate this gold pen a little bit more than that one. I also happen to have my mechanical graphite pencil. You'll want to have one of these for when we're doing our mapping and our string work. And then finally, you want to make sure that you've got your Prismacolor set. Now, there's two pencils in the Prismacolor set that are going to be pivotal for this class. And those two are, you're going to need to have the black, which is PC 935. This is going to be so that we make our gemstones really pop. And then I also happen to have the white Prisma, which is PC 938, and that's so that we get the pretty highlights that you see in the piece. And just make sure that you've got some Prismacolors handy, or your favorite color pencil set will do. And let's get started with Cassatt. Alright, so I have picked up my mechanical pencil here. You can use just a regular graphite pencil, whatever you've got. And when I'm doing this kind of work, I like to start by mapping out or creating a string for my piece. So I'm just going to start by coming out about, I'm going to say 3/4 of an inch and making a dot in each of my corners here. And hopefully this is going to show up on your screen as I start using my graphite. So you're going to see that I'm going to start to connect my dots here, and I'm going fairly lightly here and just turning my page as I go. And you can see that I'm not being perfectionistic about this. You know, I've been having the discussion with my students about letting something look handmade. We tend to get caught up in our perfectionistic ways, and I saw a great quote the other day that said, perfectionism is the enemy to creativity. And I thought, now that you just said a mouthful with. So let your inner critic go on vacation and just have some fun with me, shall we? So you can see that I've got my square here, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to divide this space in half. So I'm going to go like this, and then I'm going to turn my tile, and I'm going to go like this. And this is going to help me with creating Cassatt. So you can see very faintly there, I've got my graphite on my black tile just like so. So I've just picked up my gold Uniball pen, but I do want to give a shout out to a couple of other gold pens that I really love to use. There's a company that I love that does the Gel Extreme. This is a great gold pen. It's very, very fine tip, and you can do some really nice fine line work with this one. This one that I have in my hand happens to be the copper, but the gold is great as well. So you may want to check these guys out. Really great, and who doesn't need another pen? Come on, people. And then I found some really great paint pens that are gold. This is made by a company called Uli. Let me see if I can get that up there. And this is their metallic marker. I love this because they've got a nice fine tip, and they've got a nice broad tip. Now you can see I haven't really used the broad tip very much because I just don't do that kind of work very often, but I love working with the fine tip. It's great, and this is one of those shake it up pens, but really nice gold in there. And then finally the creme de la creme. This is such a fun pen for doing gold with. This is the Pen Touch, and of course, you know, this is such a great pen. It just lays down the most shimmery gold ever. It's a lot of fun. So if you're wanting to check this one out, I happen to have the fine tip one. Mine is out of commission right now because I've just used up all of the ink that's in it, but this is another gold that I really love. So I'm using my all-time favorite today because this one really glides. It's got a lot of movement to it. So to start with Cassatt, I want you to start thinking about the tangle bales. You know, we often use bales as a nice grid tangle where, you know, you're just creating a little bit of a daisy chain of these really nice petals, like so. And then you just turn it on its side and you do it again. And that's how you create a really nice little daisy chain. And I always refer to this as a bales flower. Okay, really easy, and it's really the foundation of Cassatt. It's the beginning of Cassatt. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to start by making that daisy chain flower. So I'm going to get in nice and close here, and you can now see my lines a little bit. And I'll just start by putting a dot in the middle, and then I'm going to come up about an inch and make another dot, and this is going to create the beginning of my bales flower. I'll go down here, coming down about an inch. Turning it on its side, come out about an inch. I'll do the same thing down here, and I'm making my petals. Same thing over here. I think this one's a little too wide, but that's okay. So there you have the beginnings of Cassatt. Now, Cassatt, what I love about this is it just keeps building on itself. It's really beautiful and very simple to work with. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to start by putting in a little circle right in between my petals here. You can see that I'm just going to turn my page, build in that nice little circle here. And if you know me, you know I love to do the tangle tipple, and this is just a nice part of this tangle here. Now, to build off of that, all I'm going to do is I'm going to come right up here and I'm going to arc and touch that circle, and then I'm going to arc again from this area and touch the tip of the next petal. That's it. So I'm going to turn. I'm going to come right in here. I'm going to touch the circle and touch down, and then I'm going to go out and touch the tip of the next one. Turning my tile, coming down and touching that tipple right there, and then going out and touching the tip of the next petal, and finally coming out, and last one right here, touching that tip. Really, really fun, super, super pretty. This is just a really nice, easy tangle, and you can take this and play with this and do all sorts of stuff with it. I mean, you could just do a bunch of these all over the page, and wouldn't that be fun? So we're going to build off of this, and if you need to pause me here, this is a great place to do it. Otherwise, we're just going to keep on rolling. So I'm just going to turn my piece slightly here to make it easy for my hand, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a petal-like shape that's just going to come right off of the side of this little circular piece that we have here. So I'm going to come in, and you can see that I'm not at the top, I'm off to the side a little bit, and I'm going to come up and make 2 dots just right there, and then I'm going to come out about 3/4 of an inch and make a dot there. I'm going to connect my dots just like so. Once I have that, I'm going to come in from this tip down to this tip and make a little arced like shape. Once I have that, I'm going to come in right over here and make a tipple. Now I'm going to go through and divide. Now watch, when I got to that tipple, I lifted my pen up, and I'm going to come over to the side. And then over here, I'm just going to pretend that there's another line coming through. Okay, let's do that again. So I'm turning my piece. I'm making 2 dots, coming out about 3/4 of an inch to an inch. And then I'm going to go ahead and connect, arc, make my circle, come through, and then I'll do another one. Turning my tile, make my 2 dots, coming out 3/4 of an inch, arc, create that little petal right there, tipple, divide. One more right here. And you can see I'm trying to keep them as close to the same size as possible. But you know, we're human beings, we're not machines, so things may look a little bit more handmade. And that's just fine with me. So go ahead, finish up yours, and then when we're going to come back, we're going to make our petals that roll right off the side of each of these. Alright, so let's just start to build right off of this here. I'm going to start with this guy right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my page just a little bit to make it easy for my hand. And I'm going to come down a little bit from the top. I would say about 1/4 of an inch, and I'm just going to make a dot. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to arc out. So you can see that it's almost like a V-like shape that we've created here. And then I'm going to come down and touch down to the original circle that we had worked with, this original piece. Once I have that, I'll go inside of the piece, create that little petal on the inside, and then remember the circle. There's our circle. And then I'm going to go ahead and divide, just like so. Super easy. I'll go to the next one and do the same. So I'm just going to keep turning my tile the way Rick and Maria have taught us. So I'm just going to come right in here, come down about 1/4 of an inch from the top, arc out, look for that V-like shape or almost like a check, and then come back to the original, and then make your petal a circle, divide the space. I'm going to just keep on turning here, coming up and off the side. So you can see there's a real zen to this. And I'm just continuing to turn the tile. And coming right back to center, and it's already looking really cool. I like this tangle because even in its progression, it's looking really interesting, and you can do a lot to play with it. So I'm just going to continue to play here, and if you need to pause me here, this is a great place to do it. So I'm just going to continue to build the way that I've been building. So I'm just going to the next one, coming about 1/4 of an inch down. I'm going to go up and touch the top. You can see that there's my little graphite line. Let's bring this nice and close. See, there's my little graphite line right there. So I'm just going to touch that graphite line, come back and down, come back to the center here, and then I'll go ahead and create that little petal that you see, a little circle, and then divide the space the best I can. Just turning, going to the next one, coming up, touch the edge, and right back down again. Create that little petal, circle, and divide. Super fun. It's already starting to get really cool. This one's a little narrower than I'd like, but that's okay. One of my students says that if something looks handmade, it's made with heart, and I agree with that. It's coming in. So I've had a chance to go around and do 3, and I think that what I'm going to do is I'm going to let it lie right there. Now, once I have that, it's got a really nice feel to it. This has kind of got this movement going, and I wanted to exaggerate that sense of movement. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build off of it. Now, as I'm looking at this, I do kind of feel like I want to add just a skosh more to it, so I'm going to play a little bit here. So I'm just going to jump off the side here, and I'm going to make this one just a touch smaller. And when I come down, I'm going to let it come down and touch right over in here. So I'm just going to let it come down and touch, and then I'll go ahead and I'll arc. Once I have that, I'll go ahead and I'll put in my little divide and keep on rolling with it. So I'm going to go ahead and turn, come up, over, arc, circle, and divide. I'm going to keep on going, up, over, arc, circle, and divide. Last one right here, coming up, over, arc, circle, and divide. Now that feels a little bit more complete to me. So go ahead and do that last go round, and then we're going to start to build off, continuing that sense of motion that we have here. I know it's kind of dizzying when you look at the piece, it just keeps moving and moving, but that was the idea that I had while I was creating my version of Cassatt here. So if you need to take a moment, pause me here, and when we come back, we'll start to build. So in the beginning, we started with these 4 petals. Can you see which ones I'm talking about? These are attached to the main part of Cassatt. So you can see I've got these 4 petals right in here, not to be confused with the layers that we've got going on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to let a little bit of an aura come off of the piece here, and what that's going to look like is I'm going to let this kind of fire off to the side. So I'm coming into this little guy right in here. Let's make this nice and big. So this guy right here that all of these are built off of. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm just going to arc off and let it just fall right off the page. And from that point, I'm going to go ahead and let it arc off again. Get that pen to go. As I turn my tile, I'm going to look for the next spot. So I'm going to back off just a little bit so you guys can see what I'm up to. So here's the petal that I'm looking for. It's this guy right here. He's attached to the main circle, and he's part of the 4 that we started with. I'm just going to arc. And notice how I'm missing the corner. I'm doing that deliberately. Letting it go off the side, turning, letting it go off the side, and one more time for good luck. So there you have it. We've got these nice movement pieces going on. Now I can see that some of these have 3 and some of these have 4. Actually, you know what? No, they're just right. So I'm just looking at these and thinking to myself that I was off, but I'm right on here. Okay. So as I continue, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to ink in now my border. So I'm going to turn and I'm going to ink in my border. Now when I get to these pieces that are falling off the page, I'm going to pick up my pen and come out the other side and continue. So in Zentangle we call that the Hollybaugh method, and that's when you have the pen lift up and come out the other side. And it was a method that was named after Rick and Maria's daughter. It was something that she came up with. And I'll show you in a minute what that means. So I'm going to just continue to go around. And there you can see that it's got a really nice feeling. It almost feels like a spiral. So I was talking about Hollybaugh here. Hollybaugh is a tangle where you'll have two lines, and it's almost like pickup sticks in my opinion. And then you'll come out the other side with two more sticks, and it makes it look like one stick is on top of the other, right? So if I keep turning, I make it look like a really interesting pattern is emerging. And you can really go hog wild with Hollybaugh, right? But that's basically the concept of lifting up and then coming out the other side, okay? So I'm going to flip this bad boy back over here, and when we come back we're going to start to add a little bit of tipple. And for those of you who have been in my classes before, you know that I like to let my tipple kind of float off or effervesce, kind of like champagne. So we're going to add a little bit of tipple into this, and as we do it, I want you to kind of feel like we're starting as a cluster and then breaking off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for all of these little areas where it's kind of like a pinwheel, and I'm going to start to put in a tipple that touches the petals of Cassatt, but then also touches those little areas that are arcing off. So you can see I've got a nice tipple right there, and then I'm going to start to break off and add a smaller tipple over here, and then I'm going to break the border and come over here, and then I'll come out and add a little bit of a smaller one, and then maybe a little bit of a smaller one over here. And you can see that it kind of gives the movement of this breaking off and moving out into the ethos, and that's the whole idea behind this, is that we want it to have kind of the feeling of like when a child is blowing bubbles in the wind and the bubbles are floating off. That was the feeling I was trying to get. So I'm going to turn my piece again, and I'm going to do that all over again. So I'm going to come up right in here. I'm going to make a nice large tipple, then a smaller one. I'll come out into my border. So you can see that I'm varying the size of these and making it look interesting. If they were all the same size, it just wouldn't have the same appeal. So I'm going to go ahead and keep on turning here, going into the next one just like we've been doing, coming up over here, and then I'm going to break out into the border. And I love going out and breaking my boundaries. You know, I think that it's definitely a metaphor for Zentangle for sure. You know, you're just breaking your boundaries and doing something that you might not have done had you not tried Zentangle before. So I'll just come over here and break out, and you can see I'm not doing it the same exact way every time, and I think leaving a little bit of randomness in there makes it interesting. So you can see that when you do this, it creates a really interesting kind of confetti feel, like it's almost bursting off of the page, which I really, really enjoy. So go ahead and do yours, I'll do mine, and then when we come back, we are going to start with color. Alright, so yay, color! Woohoo! You can see that I've actually grabbed a piece of white paper and done the same exact thing that I did over here. Well, not exactly, but as close as I could do. And so you can see it's a little bit smaller. It's actually not touching the border, I'm noticing now as I look at it. But I wanted to give you the idea of what this would look like if it was on white paper as well, because I know that not everybody has access to black paper, and it still looks really pretty on white paper too. So I'm going to go ahead and start to pick colors for the center of my piece here, and I'm going to share with you the colors that I'm using, and then hopefully you have colors that are similar to what I'm using. They don't have to be exactly the same, they'll just need to be in the same range. So in the beginning of my piece, I actually used two colors that I love very much. This is the light aqua, and this is PC992. Can you tell I love this pencil? And then I also happen to have in my hand, this is the Violet Parma, and I just love this. This is PC1008, and these two colors are fabulous on black paper. So I'm just going to go ahead and bring this guy off to the side for a moment and zoom in on this one. And we're just going to start really nice and easy here. So what this is going to look like is I'm going to start with the aqua in my hand, and I'm very, very softly going to begin to create a little bit of aqua right in towards the center of the piece here. I'm going to turn my tile and do the same. Going all the way through. And even if you were just going to do this part, it'll make such a huge difference in your piece, because you know, when you're looking at this piece, originally it looks very, very busy, but as we begin to add more color to it, it will calm it down. So you can see there's the blue that I'm using, and then I'm going to bring in the Violet Parma. And as I come in, I'm going to softly bring in that Violet Parma, but you'll notice that as I move outwards, I'm going to let it kind of fade off into a blacker kind of tip. You can see that I've left a little blackness at the top. I'm going to do the same thing where I turn, and I'm just letting it dip into a little bit of that aqua, and then as I get further towards the tip, I'm going to fade off. Okay, so go ahead and do that with yours, and when we come back, we'll start to talk about the tip of each one of these. Now, if you're working on the white paper, I'm just going to go ahead and do a quick demo of this for you. So same principle here. So I'm just going in and adding a little bit of that light aqua, and then I'll come in with a little bit of that purple in here. This is the Violet Parma. You can see that I'm letting it kind of dip into the light aqua, and then I'm going to leave the tip of this nice and light. Okay, so that's the way that you're going to do yours. So I just want to talk about colors for a second here. I recognize that some of you may not have the same colors as I do, and I don't want you to feel that you can't do the class if you don't have the same colors. I want you to pick colors that are similar to these. So if you have a sky blue, you could use a sky blue. If you have like a very light purple, you could use a light purple like a lilac. You know, you can see that here's one that's very similar in tone, but it has more pink in its nature. So I don't want you to feel as though if you don't have the same colors, you can't do the same thing. Just pick things that are similar in their nature. Now, I am going to pick up a darker purple. Now, if you happen to have a violet, or if you have Dahlia purple, which is one of my favorites, that's PC1009, you can go ahead and grab that. So a darker purple or a violet blue or a violet straight up would do just wonderfully. So I'm going to come up right into the tip here, and I'm going to add a little bit of violet into it, and you can see that I'm dipping into some of that Violet Parma. That was the lighter violet that I was using. So I'm just lightly kind of blending those guys into each other here, and you can see already it's giving me a really rich kind of gemstone feel, which is exactly what I was looking for. Okay, so you can see, look at how bright and gorgeous that is on the black paper. Don't you just love that? So once I have that done, if you're working on the white paper, you can go in with that darker color and start to add that into the tips of your piece. And look at how differently this is working here. It's a very different feel, but it's still really beautiful. It almost has kind of a boho feel to it when you're working with it. It's got a very kind of clean and soft look to it, almost beachy, as it were. Now, as I'm working with these on the white paper, I'm noticing that I'm getting a little bit of a line of demarcation here, and you can see that that line is fairly strong. So I'll go back in with that original violet that I started with, and I'll start to blur out my edges just with that original violet, just to give it a softness that I'm looking for. So you can see that I'm going very, very lightly and working that pencil in a circular motion to give it kind of a misty feel. And you can see already that that's changed the nature of the piece and really given it a nice feel. You could even come back in with some of the aqua if you wanted to and just blur the edge of where that light violet is meeting the aqua. Super pretty when you blur out those edges. Okay, so go ahead and do yours, and then when we come back, we'll start to work with those outer rim pieces. So what I'm looking for here is I'm looking to build some contrast off of this piece. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up three colors. And you can see I've got kind of an orangey yellow, I've got a nice light orange, and then I've got a deep orange right in here. So if you're not working with Prisma, what I'm looking for is kind of an orangey yellow, a nice light orange, and then kind of a reddish orange. So the color that I happen to have in my hand right now is one of my all-time favorites. This is the Spanish orange. This is PC1003. And then I also have orange, which is PC918. And then finally in my hand I happen to have, let's see here, I think this is the permanent red is what it's calling itself, but it's more orange in its presentation. And this is PC122. Okay, so you can see that these are a really nice grouping together. Now you'll also want to pick up your white Prisma pencil, and the reason for that is that we're going to start to create some highlight shading in a few minutes. So have your white Prisma pencil handy. This is different than the charcoal pencil that you got in your Zentangle kit if you are a Zentangler. This is actually the white pencil that comes with your color kit. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up those three colors that I was talking to you before, and let's go ahead and zoom on in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come right up into this little area right in here. You can see it's got a little pointed edge. I'm going to start with the Spanish yellow in here and give this a little bit of a push. So I'm not using a ton of pressure, but a little bit of pressure. And then what I'll do is I'll come further down and I'll pick up my orange, and I'm going to start to bring in that orange. Now I'm pressing fairly lightly with this. And then finally I'll come in with a little bit of red and just top that off with a little bit of red. Now you'll notice that I'm going to leave a little bit of black right in there. Okay, and I'm doing that deliberately. I'm going to come back in with some of that yellow that I started with, and I'm going to blur out my edges a little bit so that it has a nice soft blur of color. It's like an ombre of color, right? And then I'll also bring that color into this area right in here so that it looks as though that color is going throughout that petal. So I'm going to go all the way throughout the piece. So I'm starting with that light yellow first, bringing it about, I'm going to say, a quarter of a way down. Coming in with my orange, and then coming in with some of that red. Noticing that I'm leaving the black right there, and then I'm going to come in and blur off those edges. So go ahead and go all the way around this piece and do the same thing if you're doing the black. Now I'm going to come over to the white, And I'm going to use the same colors, so you can see that I'm starting with that orangey yellow first, and then I'm going to start in with some of that orange very, very lightly. I'm just barely touching the page with this. And then I'll come in and I'll finish it off with some of that red. Now, with this one, I'm going to let the red come all the way down and touch. And you can see that it already has kind of a kaleidoscope of color in there. I'll go ahead and let that red come in and touch over here, and then I'll come back and do some of that yellow in here. And I'm going to blur the edge just a little bit in here, so you can see that I'm just running that yellow right over the top, and you can see that that softens it. So go ahead and do yours, and then when we come back, we'll start to work with the outside petals. We'll start to move out into these pieces. So these are really coming along, and I love how differently these are both coming out. They're both different, but they're both equally as beautiful in their own way. And I always love to come back to pieces and try them again, and so I hope that this will inspire you to come back and try it on the white paper if you are just doing it on the black, okay? So I'm going to set this guy off to the side for a minute, and we're going to start to focus on the 4 pieces that are connected to the inner Cassatt here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my white pencil that I have in my hand, and I'm just focusing on the 4 that are connected. So I want to be very clear about that. So just the inner 4. And I'm going to come in with my white Prisma pencil and just dust the inside of where that petal is on those first 4. So you can see that I'm going to go ahead. Here's my first one. Here's my second one. I'm just going to turn it and come in, and then I'll go over here and I'll do the same, and then I'm going to turn again and do the same. Okay, so you can see now it's these 4 that I'm working on. Okay, now I'm going to pick up a really pretty light green and a really pretty dark green. I wanted to get kind of an emerald-like feel for this piece. So I have in my hand, I think this is the true green. This is PC 910. And then I have my grass green, which is PC 909. I'm going to come in with that light green first, and I'm just going to start to dust the edge. And then you're going to see me go ahead and come in with some of that darker piece. And we're having a little earthquake as I'm actually recording this, so I'm just going to pause for a minute. Okay, so the earthquake is over, but you could see that my camera was wiggling a little bit there. And so all I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and turn and start to bring in some of that green into here. So you can see I've got the light green, and then I'm switching over to the dark green. You know, earthquakes just come with the territory out here in California, so we just don't, or at least we try not to get too rattled by them. And I'm just going to move along right in through here and add a little bit of that darker green in there. And then finally, as I move along, I'll come in here and get that going. Now, if you feel like you've got a really heavy line of demarcation in here, you can always come back in with a little bit of your white if you'd like to, and just lightly soften where the light green and the dark green and the white are all meeting each other. You can see that I just lightly blurred out my edges. So I want you to think of just barely touching the page with your white pencil as you're blurring out your edges. The idea is not to get too much white down, but mainly to move the wax around. You can see how pretty that looks. Now I'm going to bring in the white one right in here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to use a similar technique where I have a little bit of the white at the bottom, but I'm going to just come in right in the middle of this piece right here. So remember how we're working on the 4, right? I'm just going to go ahead and look for my 4. And I'm going to start to dust in a little bit of that light green, and then I'll dust in a little bit of that darker green. Bring it up to the tip in here. And if you want to get it nice and dark, you can. I'll pick up a little bit of that light green and just blur the edge of where that lighter color is meeting the darker color. And then I'll go ahead with my white pencil, and you want to make sure that your white pencil's clean, and I'll just softly blur the edge of where that light green is coming into the white, and you can see that that's already softened it considerably in here. Okay, so all I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to come into each of the four. So I'm over here where the other one is. And then I'll come in right here. I'll blur out the edge just a little bit. And then I'll go ahead and give that a little softening. Turning my piece. Going right in. And then I'll go ahead and blur out the edge. And I'll blur out this edge. Got one more to go here. Coming in with the dark. Get it nice and saturated in there. Blurring the edge. And blurring the edge. And you can see, look at how pretty that is. It's already starting out on a really nice feel. So go ahead and do yours, and then when we come back, we're going to start to build out. Let's continue working with our colors in here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to work with these guys up in here. I'm going to let go of the guys that are attached to the inner circle here. And I happen to have the two purples that we worked with earlier. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to define the spaces a little bit more. So I'm going to come into these guys right up in here. Now you'll notice that I need to sharpen up my pencil. Sharpening up your pencil is really a big part of how I do color. And so you always want to make sure that you have a nice fine tip. So I'm going to go ahead and come in here, and I'm going to start to bring in that Parma violet. This is the lighter violet at first that I'm going to start to work with, and you're going to see that I'm just going to do the first two kind of stripes that are in that petal here. And then at the bottom I'm going to come in with some of that darker purple, and I'm going to deepen into it a little bit. Now you can see that I've kind of dipped up into that violet, and it gives it a real nice softening. And I might go back and forth with it and just kind of play and see how I want it to go. You can see that I've got that freedom with the Prismas to go back and forth with these pencils here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do the same thing over here. So I'm going to just bring in that nice light purple or violet, and then I'll go ahead and I will add that darker purple down towards the bottom, just getting a nice deepening in there. So I'm going to go all the way around and do mine, and I'm going to do something similar on my white tile. So you can see that I've got my white tile in my hand. I've got the light violet up here at the top, and I'm just going to go ahead and put that in, and then I'm going to dip down below where that circle is. Once I have that, as I get closer to the bottom, I'm going to add some of that deeper purple in here and in here, and you can see that I'm losing some of that gold. I can always go back in later and redefine that gold. I'm not worried about that. Now I am going to pick up my white color pencil for this, and I'm going to kind of soften my edges a little bit. So when I find that I'm working on light paper and doing this kind of coloring, I really want to make sure that it's soft and blended, not scratchy. So you can see that that has a really nice soft kind of blend to it. I'll do it again over here. So I'm just coming in and just laying down that really nice light purple. And then I'm coming in with some of that purple dahlia. And just getting that nice rich color down at the bottom. I'll dip into that lighter purple with some of my white and blur out my edges at the bottom so that it gets a nice soft appeal. And look at how pretty that is. It's just really gorgeous. So go ahead and do yours all the way around. I'm going to do mine, and then when we come back, we'll start to work in these petals. Alright, so these are coming along. So you can see that I've done all of the outside petals except for the ones that are touching the inside piece on these, and I'm really loving the way these two are coming alive together. You know, I always talk about in my classes that I love to watch a piece come to life, and we are definitely watching these two pieces come to life right now. So remember how when we first started we were working with the three oranges? We had the yellow orange, the regular orange, and then the reddish orange. We're going to pick those back up. And remember what I said to you before, if you don't have the same colors as me, don't worry about it. It's no big deal. So I'm going to take this off to the side and bring this guy in. Now I'm also going to be using my white pencil for the beginning of this. So what that's going to look like is I'm going to come into these petals that we have that are vacant right now, just black, and I'm just going to dust the area with a little bit of that Prisma pencil. And I would say I'm going about halfway up the petal here. I'll do it to all three of these just so that we get a continuous kind of feel here. And this is, you know, just me demoing it for you, and then you guys will go around and do your own. So I'm going to come in now with that yellow, and I'm going to just let that yellow kind of dust into where that white is. So you can see that I'm just doing a little dusting of it, and I would say I'm using a medium pressure, not a hard pressure. And then finally, I'm going to pick up a little bit of that orange and dust in with a little bit of orange over that yellow. And then I'll just do a skosh of red, but leaving a little bit of black at the top. So you can see that I'm just leaving a little black at the top. Now I'm going to come back in with that yellow pencil and blur where the red and the orange are meeting, just to give it a softness. And then I'm also just going to dust a little bit in here. Now you'll notice that I'm going to pick up my white pencil and just clean that up a little bit. And look at how pretty that is. I love the contrast of orange next to purple. There's just something about it that's really electric. Now, if you're one of those people that is just like, I want instant gratification, lady, come on. You can always pick up your white pen, and I'm just going to open this up just a little bit, and just go right where the black is, do a little dot and then a little bit of a line, and you can already see that that's going to give us a beautiful highlight inside of the piece. So you can see, look at how pretty that is with the highlight in it. Isn't that gorgeous? I just love that. So go ahead and go around and do all the ones that have the purple in it with your orange. And then I'm going to talk about the white one for a minute for those of you on the video who just are doing the white. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down from the top this time, and I've got my darker red. And remember how I said I like to have my pencil sharpened up? You really want to have your pencil sharpened up for this. So I'm going to go ahead and pick that up. I've got the darkest color in my hand here, and I'm just going to come down from the top, and I'm going to do this on all three. And now once I have that darkest color coming down from the top, I'm going to pick up that orange and I'm going to start to blur into the red with some of that orange. Doing that on all three of these. And then once I have that, I'll come in at the bottom with some of that yellow. And just blur it in. Just nice and soft. Look at how pretty that is. Isn't that gorgeous? And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, hey, Rami, I'm an instant gratification girl too. I mean, don't leave me out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back in with my white pen, go up to the darkest point, and draw a line down and a couple of dots. Now you'll notice that it's a little bit more subtle on this particular piece, but it's still really beautiful. Look at how pretty that is. So it has a really nice softness to it. So if you're working on the white, that's what you're going to do, and you're going to go all the way around except for the pieces that are touching the inside circle. Okay? Have fun, and I'll see you in a minute. Remember to soften your shoulders, let your breath flow, and enjoy what you're doing. This is not a task. This is something that you enjoy. So I'm just loving where these are going. Really, really fun. So we're going to start to pick up the blue and the purple that we started with in the very, very beginning of the piece. So the center colors that we started with. And I want to talk about those colors because that whole feeling, we want it to kind of permeate throughout the piece here. We're trying to let that move outward. It has a really nice flow to it. And so I really wanted to continue that flow with those purples. Now you can see I also have my white pencil in my hand, and we're going to use that to start the piece off. So I'm going to just take this guy off to the side here, and we're going to focus right in on this guy. So I'm going to come up here into the part that's flowing outward, and you're going to see that I'm going to start to lay down a little bit of white very, very lightly on the piece. I'm just barely touching it, but as I get in closer to the tip of it, you're going to see me push a little bit harder. You can see that that gives us a little bit more electricity, and then you'll notice that I'm just going to start to fade outward as I move away from the center. Now, once I have that, I'm going to start to pick up that blue that I had, and you'll notice that I'm working on the side of the pencil because now we're working in a bigger swath of area, and I always like to work on the side of my pencil when I'm doing a larger swath area. And you'll notice I'm trying not to be perfectionistic about this. In fact, I'm trying to have a little bit of imperfection here. And the reason for that is it'll make the blend go that much easier. I've got the purple in my hand, and I'm going to start to create that ombre of purple. And then finally, I'm going to pick up that dark purple right on the edge and let that flow outward. And it has such a soft feel to it. Now I may come back in with some of that Parma violet here and just let it dip a little bit. And then I may come back in with some of that blue and let it dip in a little bit. And then I might just softly dust with the white. But you can see when I kind of fade out here, look at how that just takes all that electricity and starts it moving outward. And that's really what I'm shooting for, is that idea of the movement of color. Okay, so you're going to do the same thing in each one of those little areas, those triangles that we have. Now, if you're working on the white, I'm going to just bring my white in here. And let's go ahead and make that nice and large. This time I'm starting just with the blue. Okay, so I'm just starting with the blue, and I'm going to lightly dust that area with the blue. Now you'll notice I'm going to come back in towards the center, and I'm going to give it a little bit of a push, and that's going to bring a little bit of intensity into that turquoise, right? Now I'll pick up some of that Parma purple and start to dust it into the blue. And you can see I'm kind of dipping back and forth into that turquoise. And then finally I'm going to take some of that purple that I had, that dahlia purple, the darker purple, and I'm going to let it run out towards the end of the piece here. It's almost like a watercolor effect that we're getting. Now, to blend in here, I'm going to be using my white pencil just to soften everything. So I really want to get a soft blend between the dahlia purple and the Parma purple. So you can see that I'm kind of blurring out the edges in here. And then I'm going to start to make my way down the Parma purple into the turquoise. And then from the turquoise, I'll dip into the heavier turquoise, and look at how that took it and softened it just a little bit. And you know, I might dip back into those edges and give it a little push here and there just to soften it, because we do want to have it have a nice blend. So go ahead and do yours. I'm going to finish up mine, and when we come back, we're going to work with the tipple, and we're going to start to work with the pieces that are around the original piece. But look at how pretty that is. I'm just loving that. Have fun. All right, so you can see these two are really taking shape quite nicely. I love the difference between the two. It's kind of neat to see. So we are going to start to build a little bit more off the piece here. And I want to talk to you about the color gray in a piece. Now, for the black, I'm going to also have my white pencil handy, but for over here, I'll use the white in a different way. So let's come over to the black piece here first. So I'm going to go over and I'm going to blow this up so that it gets nice and big. And in my hand, I happen to have the 70% cool gray. This is my favorite pencil from Prisma because it looks like graphite and it doesn't smudge. And as a left-handed person, we're notorious for wearing our graphite on our hands. And so this is a great substitute for graphite. Now, the other thing that I want to say about this is that gray shows up really nicely on the black paper, whereas graphite might show up as shiny. You can still use it, but it'll show up more shiny in its texture. So I happen to have the 70% cool gray. You could use the 50% warm or the 50% cold. Those are both great grays as well. One has a little bit more taupey feeling than the other. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here, and you can see that I just sharpened up my pencil really well. And let's focus on this guy right here and see if I can get that really nice and close. I'm going to come in with the gray, and you can see already how soft and smoky it is. Now, for my California students, I'm sorry, I had to use that word because smoky is smoky. And generally, we like to use the word foggy out here because we don't want to tempt the fire gods. So you could call it foggy as well. So now you'll notice that I've left a little bit of black in here. And I'm going to just pop a little bit of that white in there where the black was, and then watch, I'm going to start to blur into the gray just a little bit, and I'm not using a heavy tension, I'm using a nice light tension, and you can see that that gives it a really nice softness to the orbs. Now I might go over here and redefine that white just a little bit, and then after I've had a chance to define that white, if I want to come back in and give this gray a little bit more definition, I can. Now, do you remember early on in the video where I was talking about having a black color pencil? This is where this kind of comes in handy. You can come back into the edge here and just go ever so lightly over the gray and just give it a little bit of definition, and look at how soft and beautiful that is. You can, play with it and blur it in a little bit if you're wanting to play with it. And then finally at the end, when we're finishing up the piece, you'll come back in with your white pen and you can do a little bit of a little arc, and then you can do a dot on one side, and look at how luminous that makes that little tipple look. It's just beautiful. Now I know we've got a lot of tipple to do. The only place that I'm going to tell you not to do the tipple is inside of the Cassatt, so leave those tipples alone. We'll be coming back in with the gold pen and working with those. So just doing the tipple on the exterior for that is really what I want you to focus on. Now, if you're working on the white piece, let's go ahead and bring this bad boy in there. I'm going to come in with that same pencil, and you can see that I'm right in here, and I'm going ever so softly, so really going nice and soft, and you can see my pencil's moving in a circular like motion. I'm trying to get a misty feel off of it, or a foggy feel. See how I'm leaving that nice light source right in there? I'm going to come back in towards the edge and give this a little bit of a push with my pencil. And then I'll come back in just with a little bit of that black pencil right along the edge in here, just to give it almost a charcoal-like feel. And then finally, I'm going to come in with some of my white and just blur my edges. You can see I'm really playing that up and making it look nice and soft. Now for this one, we're not able to put any detailing into the light source on here, but you can always come over here if you want to and do a little bit of an arc and a couple of dots, and that gives it a really nice feel as well. So that's a nice option for those of you who are playing with the white tile. So go ahead, have some fun, and then when we come back, we'll start to work inside of the Cassatt with that same gray color. So to me, Tipple looks a lot like confetti, or, like a child blowing bubbles in the wind. I just love the feeling of it. It has such a festive feel, and you can see what that's done with the piece so far. Really brings a levity to it, which I love. So I'm going to take those two colors that we've been working with, the gray and the white, and the black for that matter. I will be using that too. And we're going to start to bring that into the pieces that are attached to our Cassatt. So I'm just going to go ahead and bring this nice and large here. And what that's going to look like is I'm going to come in and start to lay down some of that gray right in here. And you'll notice that it's very, very subtle. And then I'm leaving a little bit of black in towards the top of the where the Cassatt is meeting that petal. Now I'm going to come back in with some of that white, and I'm just going to let it dust right over the gray a little bit, and I'll bring it out the other side of the circle here just to give it kind of a smoky or foggy feel. So you can see that that brings just a little bit of definition into the piece. Now I'm going to come back in and add just a little bit of gray right over the white just to soften it. And it just gives it a really soft feeling. It differentiates it from the purple just a little bit, not a lot, but just enough. So I'm going to go around and do that to all four of those. Now, if you're working on the white tile here, let's just go ahead and grab this guy. I'm going to come in with the gray again and start to just dip that gray into the petal here. And once I've done that with the gray, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to push a little bit harder. And then once I have that, I'm going to come in with my white right at the bottom and blur out my edges of that petal, just to soften it and give it a little bit of differentiation in there. Now, if you feel like there's too much white in there, you can always come back in and just dip a little bit more so that it's nice and close to where the petal is meeting the Cassatt itself, and then blurring it out just a little bit, which gives it a nice softness. So go ahead and do yours. I'm going to finish up mine, and then when we come back, we're going to start to work on the background of this, which is really going to bring the whole thing together. So let's talk about the background. We're going to start to work on the background on the black piece first. Now, do you remember the greens that we picked up for around the Cassatt in the beginning? We're going to pick up those greens again, and we're also going to take that orangey yellow and use that as well. Now, I want you to go ahead and sharpen up your pencil here because we're going to be working with large swaths of color again. And what this is going to look like is I'm just going to push the white one off to the side here and bring him into focus. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to work in the quadrants of this piece here. So I'm going to work on the inside square, and I'm going to work all around the petals and this kind of curved shape and the tipple that are in here. Now, what that's going to look like is I'm going to take my green pencil, this is the lightest green, and I'm going to go ahead and start to bring that into the background here. So I'm laying my foundation of color, and we talked about earlier about the pressure of the pencil, so we want to just have a nice light pressure on the pencil. Now you'll notice that on the edge of the square, I'm leaving a little bit of blackness in here. So I'm just going to leave that blackness in there. And I'm just going through and just adding this into this quadrant. And this is just kind of a demo for you to see what I'm up to as I'm creating the piece here. So I'm just going to come up, leave a little blackness on the edge, and then go around all the little circles and the tipple that I have. You can see that I'm working on the side of that pencil, not the tip, but the side, so that it just gives it kind of a soft dusting of color. Now I'm going to come back in with that darker green, and I'm going to start to get right into those nooks and crannies here, the places where the petals meeting the green here. And I'm just starting to work around the tipple and giving this a pretty good push. I would say this is a medium to heavy tension that I'm using on this pencil, just to really get in there and exaggerate all of the edges that are there. Now once I've got that, I'm going to pick up my yellowy orange color, and I'm going to go right into where the edge is here, and I'm going to start to blur into that green. So you can see I'm just starting to blur into the green. I'm just kind of going around the edges a little bit. And it's almost like a watercolor. I'm not being perfectionistic about it. In fact, I'm being rather kind of messy with it. I don't want it to have a perfect edge. I want it to feel like that color is seeping into what we're doing. And isn't that so pretty? And it does pull it all together quite nicely. So you can see that that's really got a nice feel to it, and it's bringing that all together. So that's the way that you're going to do the black tile. Now I'm going to go ahead and bring in the white tile in here. And I'm going to do a very similar technique, but you're going to see that it looks a lot different when you use the same colors. So I'm just going to come in very, very softly, almost like a watercolor in here. I'm barely touching the page with that pencil. I really want it to have a soft feel to it. Now, as I get further out, I'm going to go ahead and take my darker green, I'm going to sharpen it up, and on the outside edge here, I'm going to apply the darker green. And I'm going to let it kind of dust back and forth into where that lighter green is. You can see that I'm just kind of going very softly with it. But as I get towards the outside edges, I'm going to start to push a little bit harder. I'm going to come in over here. Now, I didn't do enough green over here, so I need to bring in that original light green. Because I just kind of want to show you what the whole quadrant is going to look like as we kind of work through these little spots. You know, in Zentangle we break up the pieces of the composition so that we have places in which to work, and that's kind of what I'm doing here, is that I'm just breaking this down into little pieces in which I'm working. You can see that I'm just working that pencil on the side and going in. And then as I get out towards the edges, I'm giving it a little bit of a heavier push. So you can see that that starts to look a little bit like a watercolor in here. And you know, I'll play with this for a while and get it the way that I want it, and you'll probably play with yours too. Now, I'm going to come back in with a little bit of that yellow, and where I'm bringing the yellow is actually nice and close to our piece here. So you'll notice that it's kind of the reverse of what we just did on the other one. It's a little different technique, gives it a little glow to the piece. And then once I've done that and I've really gotten it the way that I want it, I'll go ahead and I'll grab that white pencil again, and I'm going to soften out my edges. So you're going to see me just dip right into that yellow where it meets the green, and it starts to give it a really beautiful watercolor feel, almost like it's seeping into the green. And then I'll start to work inside of the greens, little circular motions. And then I'll go outward towards the edge and really get into those nice deep emerald greens. And look at how pretty that is. Isn't that so, it's kind of moody but yet very light. Look at how pretty. So it's interesting how the same composition can be so interesting in two different ways, you know, using the black paper and using the white. So go ahead and do yours. I'm going to finish up mine, and then when we come back, we are going to finish the outside edge and then put our chops. So I'm really loving where this is going, but I feel as though the the white tile is missing a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and just take this guy off to the side and bring the white into focus here. And a lot of you who have taken classes with me before know that I talk about something called carrying color, and I've mentioned it a little bit briefly in this class today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about this nice orange and yellow and red that we've been working with. I'm going to start to bring it out into the border, but I'm going to bring it out in such a way that it's going to seep. And so I have my yellow in my hand, and I'm going to work on the side of that pencil again, and I'm just going to lightly let some of that yellowy orange kind of dust into my border here. Now I'm not doing a ton of it, but I am doing enough of it so that you can see it. And I'm going to let it come around the corner here, and I'm going to do this all the way around the piece, but I'm just going to do this quadrant to show you for the demo. So you can see that I'm just getting in there. Now I'm going to take some of my orange, and I'm just going to bring that orange in very, very lightly, and I'm going to go about halfway through the yellow there. So I'm going really nice and light. I'm not going heavily at all. I just want to give it the idea that it's kind of seeping out from the edges. Once I've had a chance to get it to seep out from the edge, I'm going to go ahead and grab that heavier red. This is that kind of orangey red that I've been talking about, and I'm going to let that go right along where the green is. And you can see I'm giving this a pretty good press, but not so heavy that you can't see the orange. But you can see that it's defining the space and giving it a little bit of interest. Now what I'll do is I'll come back in with my yellow that I started with, and I'm going to start to blur out the edges a little bit. So you can see that I'm just going around and blurring out those edges and giving it a softness. So that when we come back in, look at how pretty that is. It has that transition of moving out into the border. So I'm going to go ahead and go all the way around and do mine. If you're working on the white, you go ahead and do yours. And then when we come back, we're going to fill in those tipple that are inside of our Cassatt and then do our chop. Alright, so we are coming to a close here pretty quickly. One of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to start to go back into Cassatt here for a second, and I'm going to start to add a little bit of gold right inside of my circles here. You can see that I'm just going to go through and add that gold in there. I'm also going to do it to the outer lying petals. And so you can go ahead and do that to yours, and if you're working on the white, you can do that in the white as well, and it'll really have a nice pop to it. You can see that it's just a really nice finishing touch for the piece. So go ahead and do yours. I'm going to finish up mine, and then when we come back, we'll do just a little bit of highlighting in the center, and we're on our way. So I'm also going to come into the center here and start to add a little bit of highlighting right here in the center. And I really feel like this kind of finishes off the piece and really gives it a focal point, which I love. So I'm just kind of turning and adding those in. And I'll do the same thing on the white and add those in on that as well. So you can see that I'm in the white one, and I'm just going to go ahead and add that nice highlight into the white. You'll notice that it's a little bit more subtle, but it has a really unique softness to it that I just really love. So go ahead and do your highlights. I'm also going to add some highlights into these pieces out in here. I feel like they're kind of calling out for a little bit of highlighting. So I'm just going to add a nice highlight right in here and a couple of dots. So you go ahead and do yours. I'm going to do mine. And then when we come back, I think I'm going to add just a little bit of wallpaper on this one and we'll do our chops. Okay, so I like where this is going, but I feel like it's missing a little bit of something. It's just saying that it needs a little something extra. So some of you have taken my classes before know that I love to do wallpaper when it feels like it's missing a little something. So what we're going to do is we're going to come into the space that's all around our tangle here. And I'm going to start by making sure that the pencil is fully sharpened up, especially for wallpaper. You want to make sure that you have that. And I'm going to be working with the darker green when I do this. So I'm just going to come in right here, and I think I'm going to use Printemps for our wallpaper today. I like to use Printemps a lot for wallpaper, and I'm just coming in and starting to make a really nice spiral. Now some of you have heard me talk about this before. When you go slow, when you make your spirals, it really shows up that you took the time. If you tend to do your spirals really fast, they tend to look a little bit more messy, and I like to make mine look a little bit more deliberate. So you can see that I'm just coming in and I'm going to make them vary in size. So you can see that I'm bringing in a smaller one right here, and let's make this a little bit bigger so that you can really see what I'm up to. And I might just let a little one come in right here. I don't want to get too far into that kind of yellowy green. I want to leave that alone as much as I can. So I'm really just trying to embellish the areas that have the darker green in them. And I'm taking my time and just really enjoying what I'm doing. I'm staying present with it all. So I'm going to go throughout the piece, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm just kind of bring them in randomly. I'm not going to be really heavy-handed with my wallpaper. So you're going to see me just kind of move around a little bit here and there and create them. I don't want it to get too busy, but I also just didn't feel like there was enough going on there either. So go ahead and do yours, I'll do mine, and when we come back, we will finish up. Alright, so you can see that I've had a chance to add the wallpaper in, and I was just kind of playing around with the piece and decided to add some dots inside of my little gold pieces that I had put inside of the tipple in here as well. So, if you want to play with those, maybe you add black, maybe you add white, whatever is kind of feeling like it's right to you today, go for it. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is when you're finishing up a piece, I like to go in and just clean up my lines. So if there was anything that got lost when you put your color pencil down, you can go back through with your gold pen and clean those pieces up, which is what I've done with both of these. So you can see that my lines are nice and clean and ready to finish up. So I'm going to pick up my pen, my gold pen, and I'm going to put my chop on the piece. So your chop is just your initial, and it's just a way of saying that you've completed and that you're feeling done with the meditation that you've done today or the creation that you've done today. And I like to hide my chop in the piece. I'm going to come right down here in the corner on this one and just add a little R over here, and then I might come over here on this one since it seems to be lending itself a little better in this corner. So it's kind of fun to just finish up in a really nice clean way. And you can go through and just look and see if there's any places where you want to add highlights before you go ahead and do that. So I hope you've enjoyed the class. I want to just give a shout out to my friend Heidi Kay. She is the creator of Cassatt, and if you want to check her out, you can go to her new website, which by the way is beautiful. She just finished it, and she's got free videos on there. She's got her classes on there. She's got classes for purchase on there. She's just an amazing tangler, and if you like working in color, Heidi is like my tangle sister in color. We are tanglers in crime, I tell you. We both love to work with color. she works with pan pastels. She works with eco lines. She's great. And if you want to check her out on Facebook, you could check her out at Tangled and Living Color Outside the Box on Facebook. Now, if you like what you did today with me and you want to join my community, I am the Tangled Yogi, and we have the Tangled Yogi Art Community page on Facebook. You should definitely come and join us. Just answer the questions on the join button, and you'll get let in, and you can share your work with us. And we have a great community of students and teachers, and we're just a lot of fun, very supportive people. If you want to check out more of my classes, you can go to tangledyogi.com. I have a ton of classes that are up there, and also paid for classes as well that are my more advanced classes, and would love to have you try those out. Those are at the vintage videos. And then I also sell a lot of tiles on the Tangled Yogi shop. I'm kind of a paper snob, so if you want to check out some really nice paper for doing color pencil work, go and visit us there. And then finally, if you want to find me on Instagram, I post almost every other day on Instagram what I'm working on, and future classes come from there as well. So there you have it. We have created Cassatt. Such a fun class. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give us a thumbs up, or subscribe by hitting the subscribe button on YouTube. We would love to have you join us for upcoming classes, and if you subscribe, you get alerts when I put up my new classes. All right, well, that's me, and this is the end of class. So this is Rami Marks, your Tangled Yogi, signing off until we tangle together.